Hi there, I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com. In this video, I'm going to talk about where you should start your accent training depending on what your native language is. We'll talk about help for Arabic speakers, speakers of African languages, Chinese languages, French, Hebrew, Indian English languages, Japanese, Korean, Russian, and Spanish. And for even more details about other languages, you can check out the information on our website, speechmodification.com, where we have free guides for all native languages for approaching American English accent, American English pronunciation, and more. So where do we want to start? I want to briefly talk about the starting point for each of these languages. This is based on what's going to have the biggest impact for you based on what other languages you speak. Because even though everyone's an individual, our native language guides how we hear and speak English and what accent errors that we make. And if you start in the right place, you can learn quite a bit and have a big impact on how you sound. As you move forward, you'll be looking at other patterns as well. But these are the things that I've developed over many years of working with people from all different areas, all different languages, and what typically is most helpful for them as a starting point. So if you speak Arabic, you should definitely start with working on vowel schwa. If you speak African English, learning about vowel sounds and spelling is key. For Chinese speakers, this is Mandarin, Cantonese, other languages spoken in China, looking at how words link together, word endings linking is the most important thing you can begin with. For French speakers, looking at the syllable stress in words. So which syllable the word is stressed on, looking at longer words is going to have a great impact and give you a really good first start. For Hebrew speakers, looking at the H sounds at the start of words. For Indian languages, huge variety here, but most Indian people from India also speak the same English that's spoken in India. So that is definitely a big influence on how you speak English. And for them, looking at how you say the R sounds is typically really important, both at the start, middle, and ends of words. So R is a consonant sound and R is a vowel. For Japanese speakers, looking at the L sounds is a great place to start. For Korean speakers, it's the Z sounds. For Russian speakers, looking at W and V sounds. And for Spanish speakers, looking at how you say consonants at the ends of words. So I'm going to go into a little more detail for each of these. There are resources here on the channel, also on my website, speechmodification.com, for each of these patterns. And I'm going to give you some help for where you can find those by looking in the description for this video and probably the first comment. I'm going to put several links for other videos on the channel that go into more detail about each of these patterns. No matter what language you speak, a lot of these patterns will affect you. So you may already know about some of them, you may not know about others, but these are the places where I would recommend that you start. So for Arabic speakers, what do I mean when I say start with vowel schwa? Well, vowel schwa is the most common sound in American English. It sounds like and it's in words like some and money. It's also in words like was and does. And one thing you can see is that it's spelled a lot of different ways. For Arabic speakers, the most important thing is to make a distinction between the sound and the sound. So Arabic has this sound, American English has this sound, and basically you have a tendency, instead of saying some, to say it more like some. So being able to differentiate between words that have and words that have is very difficult for the ear. So for example, the difference between hot and hut, or not and nut, these are not the same. And you have a tendency to use more of an open rather than the central sound. So learning what words have the sound, how it's spelled, and contrasts between and are key. I'll put some links in the description for videos to start you with this. I also have a short series talking about other air patterns for Arabic speakers. And in my American Accent 6-week course, you can get a full free guide for what accent error patterns Arabic speakers have, how to get started, and addressing those patterns. So that's the first step for Arabic speakers. Then for African English, of course, there are many, many languages spoken in Africa, but English is commonly spoken in Africa, and what I'll say is that the primary difference between African English dialects and American English dialects is the differences between the vowel sounds and spelling. So in African dialects, commonly what you see is what you say. So in the word say, for example, we have the A vowel, which sounds like A. And that's true in both American English and African English. But in a word like says, in American English, this has the eh vowel, says. So it's the same vowel that's in red. We really should write it with a Z and a letter E, says. But in African dialects of English, they may say says for this word. Or the word said, for example, and the word head, those also both have the eh vowel. If we followed the rules, we would spell it like we do the word red. We'd spell said and head. So again, in African speakers of English may use the spelling to determine how to pronounce a word. This is also true in a word like person. In American English, that sounds like person, with almost no vowel there. And in African English, it might sound more like person, with a full vowel on the son syllable. So it affects the rhythm of words, it affects the vowel sounds in words, a little bit consonant sounds as well, but for speakers from Africa, speaking African languages and African English dialects, I definitely recommend starting with vowel sounds and looking at the spelling versus the sound. So learning the sounds, learning common words to watch out for, and you can get help for that in the resources that I'll put in the description for this video and also in our American Accent 6-week course. Another great course for that is our Sounds of English course, where I walk you through all of the different sounds of English, how they're spelled, accent error patterns to watch out for, and a lot more details. So that's what I would suggest for African English speakers. For Chinese, Mandarin, Cantonese, Chinese speakers, the most important starting point, I would say, is looking at linking. So this affects how the end of one word connects to the beginning of another word. So for example, if I had a phrase like in an apartment, often the error that you'll hear from a Chinese speaker is that rather than in an apartment, linking those N's to the next sound, those N's might drop, they might turn into NG sounds, and the linking is missing, sounds will drop, and it's much more word by word rather than linked. So learning about how to link specific sounds like the N at the ends of words. Also, Mandarin and Cantonese speakers may tend to say, when there's consonants linking together rather than had that, I might hear had that, or just hat that. So you have a tendency to, when you hear the linked sounds of American English, instead of being able to follow the patterns that we do, in this case it's using an unreleased D, you might just drop that D because you're not hearing it when I say had that, and that comes out in your accent like hat that. Or if you're trying to pay attention and make sure you're putting the D on, you end up with an extra sound like had that. So linking is key, and it's a big part of what makes the difference between sounding natural, being well understood as a Chinese speaker speaking English, and the differences between how phrasing and linking works in Chinese versus in English. That is where I'd start as a Chinese speaker. You can get help for that in my linking and fluent sounds playlist, as well as in our online courses. I do have quite a few videos talking about that, and looking at linking T and D and linking N is a great place to start within the broader context of linking. Vowel to vowel linking is also very important for Chinese speakers. Okay, next let's look at French speakers. So with French, I was a little bit torn. I wanted to talk about the H sounds at the beginning of words. That's a really good place to start for a lot of French speakers. But many French speakers are aware of that and have already kind of gotten past that in working. If you're a true beginner in English as a French speaker, definitely consider working on H. I'll talk about that in more detail when I'm talking about Hebrew speakers. But for French, I would say for most people, the most important place to start is looking at syllable stress. This is just because there's so many French words that have come into English, but they haven't kept the same rhythm that they have in French. So, for example, just a simple word like menu in French is stressed on the second syllable. In English is stressed on the first syllable. So we say menu rather than menu. And many longer words are stressed in a different place in English rather than in French. It's much more typical in French, for example, words that end with ment, ment in French are stressed on that. In English, we have, for example, apartment. We stress on the part syllable rather than apartment. So there's many words between French and English that make that difficult. And just generally, a lot of times French speakers will stress towards the ends of longer words or on the incorrect syllable. And even though you would think that wouldn't have a big impact on being understood, a lot of times your listener can't tell what word you're saying, doesn't recognize the English word because you're not following the stress patterns. And it changes what vowel sounds we use. So we tend to use a clear vowel in the stressed syllable of a word and reduce vowels in unstressed syllables. And so if you're stressing on the wrong syllable, even something simple like, say, the word banana. When I say banana, I'm using a schwa, a clear vowel a, and an unstressed schwa. So my stress syllable, the a does say a. The unstressed syllables, I have the schwa sound, banana. Listen to how different it sounds if I change that pattern and I stress in the beginning. Banana or banana doesn't even sound like the same word. You can't recognize it. And so that's how different it can sound on an everyday word if you're a French speaker and you're stressing the wrong syllable. Of course, this is not exclusive to French speakers, but I'm pointing it out in the context of French because it's definitely the place I would say to start if you're a French speaker. You can get help for that. In the videos here on the channel, I'll highlight some of my syllable stress videos, as well as in my American Accent 6-week course. That's one of the places that we start when it comes to intonation patterns. We look at syllable stress. So that's help for you, French speakers. I didn't mention it in my chart and then at the beginning, but I would say for German speakers, the most important thing to look at is voicing. That's where I would start. So learning where we have voice sounds at the beginning and the ends of words, looking at a difference between a word like edge with the voiced j sound and etch with the voiceless ch sound. German speakers tend to use voicing where they shouldn't and remove voicing where they shouldn't because the patterns and rules are different in German. And this is one of the most noticeable things about the accent, and one of the things that once you can get, for example, the s and z sounds correct, the ch and j sounds, the t and d sounds, it's really going to help people understand you well. You can learn all about voiced and voiceless sounds in our Sounds of English course on speechmodification.com, and I'll include some resources in the description for you here as well. So not to leave out the German speakers. Sorry you're not in my chart. Okay, and then when it comes to Hebrew, I would say here's where I'll talk about the sound that letter H makes. So in American English, the sound is a little bit constricted in the throat. It does have some noisy air, but it's not at all a sound or any sort of strong sound. It's also important to recognize the difference between when the word starts with a sound and when the word starts with a vowel. Hebrew speakers tend to put the H sound on where it doesn't belong. So the difference between, for example, hate and ate, or have and av, I would really work on being able to use a nice light American English sound in words, and then being able to start words with vowels without any windy air, without any sound. So for example, I ate, learning about vowel to vowel linking, how to do the H sound. There's a lot of details to help you with that here on the channel. And this is also a little bit true, I'd say, for French speakers, Italian speakers. The H is kind of an important sound, Russian speakers as well. But I'm going to highlight that for Hebrew speakers as your starting point for American English accent and American pronunciation. Great. Okay, next, let's look at another great big category, which I call Indian English. So this is for speakers of lots of different Indian languages. There's a big variety, and there's some small details that I would point out if you are a speaker of Hindu or lots of the other different Indian languages. There are some differences in the accent patterns that you have, but something that comes from the way English is spoken in India versus the dialects in America. The dialects in India are more similar to British English. So where I would suggest that you start is with R sounds. Not only the at the start of words, making sure that you don't have a rolled R there, but also the air, ear, ire sounds, etc. Making sure that you're not using the British so if you're saying a word like bird or paper, that you have the tight back American R. It's different in Indian English dialects and British dialects, and you can get lots of help for R in my R playlist here on the channel and in our Sounds of English course. I also do have a course on the website specifically for Indian English speakers that you might find helpful. It's going to walk you through all of the patterns, but this is where I would start for if you speak an Indian language and if you learn to speak English in India or have that kind of a background in your English. Great. Okay, let's keep going. Let's talk about Japanese speakers. So for Japanese speakers, I would say begin with the L sound, especially L blends. In a word like blend, we have the L together with another sound. In a word like, we have PL blends like in place, SL blends like in sleep, CL blends like in clutch, BL blends, etc. We also want to look at the L versus the R sounds and L at the ends of words like in feel or fall. So mastering that L, the tongue position, all the different varieties, how to put it together with other sounds at the beginning and the ends of words is going to be a great starting point for Japanese speakers. You can get help for that in our Sounds of English course, and also, of course, I'll put some resources for you here in the description of this video, so you can go right to that here on the channel. Okay, for Korean speakers, definitely some overlap with some of the other patterns I've already talked about, but for Korean speakers, what I'm going to suggest is that you start with the Z sound, sometimes spelled with letter Z, often spelled with letter S, knowing where these sounds happen, especially at the beginning of words like the word zipper. You may have a difficulty with the difference between the Z sound and the J sound. And so I will hear sometimes jipper instead of zipper, or Amajon instead of Amazon. For the native speaker listener, that's going to be really difficult to hear and tell what it is that you're trying to say. And we also have many Z's at the ends of words where it's spelled with letter S. So a word like was really sounds like was, and a word like when we have plurals, for example, like places, this S sound is a Z sound. So you want to know where the sound is, how to use your voice, and then in words like zipper or zero, making sure that you're using the correct position of the tongue and movement of the tongue, so you don't end up with that affricate sound j, but rather the fricative sound z. So that's where I would start as a Korean speaker, tackling American accent and English pronunciation. And again, there's going to be some more resources. Go to the description and you can go to some links for help with those topics related to the Z sound. Great, okay. For Russian speakers, I would start with the W and V sounds, making sure that you can make a clear distinction between these two sounds, that you're not substituting one for the other, and you're not using a sound that's a little bit in between. So the W or W sound is what's called a semivowel. We glide between the U sound and the sound, W. So we have lip rounding, and we use both lips for this. So if I'm saying a word like wet, wet, you can see my lips are rounded. You can hear the W sound, versus the V sound is a continuing sound. I can hold it. My mouth is in the same position for the V as it is for the F sound. So I have the word fairy and the word very. The V is just a voiced version of the F sound. So my upper teeth and my lower lip connect to restrict the air to make that continuing fricative sound. So I want to be able to make sure that when I'm saying wet, I'm using just my lips. Vet, I'm using my teeth and my lips. And this sound can continue. This sound, w, cannot. You can get lots of help for W and V here on the channel and in our Sounds of English course. And this is an important distinction for Indian English speakers, Chinese speakers as well. And it's the starting point I would suggest for Russian speakers. Be aware that a lot of people are not doing a full substitution. There is a little bit of a sound in between, like v, where I'm not doing enough rounding, but I'm that lower lip's staying in, so it's kind of in between a v and a w. And that's what you want to avoid. We don't have that sound in English. Great, okay, let's take a look lastly at Spanish speakers. So for Spanish speakers, where I would start is at the ends of words, particularly those with consonant sounds. T and words that end with T, like hot or not, and words that end with D, like need and did. I will often hear those T's and D's drop off. Other consonant sounds tend to drop off at the ends of words. Learning about how we make those released and unreleased stop sounds and linking consonant sounds is going to be super helpful for Spanish speakers. It's a pattern that comes across all of your sounds, and it also will affect things like plurals, because if I'm saying, for example, cans, making sure that n and z sound don't drop. Also for past tense and present tense, so the difference between, for example, move, moves, and moved. Sometimes Spanish speakers will just say move for those. They may devoice the end sound, so it might sound like moof instead of move. The S, the Z and D sounds might drop. So it makes you sound like you're making a mistake in grammar when it's really about an accent error pattern. So for Spanish speakers, starting with consonant sounds at the ends of words, T and D are a great place to start. Plurals and verb forms are also a great place to start. It's going to make a big difference in how you sound, your understanding of the way English sounds, and how you're producing English. So that's where I would start as a Spanish speaker. For Spanish speakers, I do have an online course that is specifically based on Spanish that goes through all of the accent error patterns that can help you, and you can find that on our website, speechmodification.com. Our American Accent 6 Weeks course has resources regardless of what your native language is to show you what patterns you'll have and where to begin, what to work on when learning and improving American accent and American English. Our Sounds of English course covers all of the different sounds and refers to different accent error patterns to watch out for. That's a great one for understanding all of the vowel and consonant sounds of English, utilizing them, and really building your confidence by having a strong foundation in American English sounds and pronunciation, making you feel confident to pronounce anything that you want. I hope this was helpful for you as an overview, and people often ask me where to start, and it does really help to know which patterns you have in your native language, and that's a great resource for you. Of course, many of the patterns that I talked about, most of them today, affect not just the language that I suggest for starting, but all languages. I would definitely say, though, keep in mind what your native language is that you speak, and that's going to help you orient to where to begin with the materials here on the channel and also on our website, speechmodification.com, and just in your journey in understanding why your English may be a little different, what errors you might be making, and how to improve. Please feel free to let me know what your native language is. I'd love to hear about what backgrounds my viewers have, what questions you have, and what's challenging for you. Tell me if you check out some of the additional resources, if you find them helpful for a starting point for you. And if you've been on this journey for a long time, sometimes going back to the beginning is a great resource. If you'd like to know more advanced things to do, if you already have mastered the patterns I talk about for your language, let me know in a comment. I'll tell you where else to go and what to do next. Thanks so much for watching this video, for being part of the channel, and I look forward to seeing you in our next week's video, as well as in our Saturday live question and answer class. You can get lots of resources here on the channel and on our website. Leave me a comment or a question, and I'll direct you to where to start. I'm Christine Dunbar from speechmodification.com. Remember, if you want to sound like a native speaker, you can do it. speechmodification.com. Bye, everyone. Hope to see you again soon.